Okay, class, we're going to cover chapter 13 today. I'm excited for this particular chapter because though it is not necessarily the longest of chapters, I think it's got a lot of good points to take away to help illustrate how cultures in action within an organization are represented in the symbolism, are impregnated with meaning and detail, and help to explain organizational life. I hope that you guys are doing well on the organizational paper at this point. If you have any questions, please, again, don't hesitate to contact me. But let's get into chapter 13. Some of the sources of cultural success. Cultural success is measured within an organization by how accurately, how well it represents itself, or it represents its goals and the symbolism that it chooses to represent its culture. How do people come together? Is that coming together valuable and useful? Is it instilling in the membership of the organization the right virtues, the right values? Are you getting what you're looking for? So think about some of the sources of cultural success. How someone becomes a member of a group is important. Are you chosen? Are you selected out of a big pool of people and you are chosen because you have certain characteristics, certain values, certain abilities, certain aptitudes? Most job-related situations where the organization is a corporation envision that they selected you from a large pool of available candidates and you were selected because of the skill set that you brought to the table. However, there's also different groups where how you join the group is relatively important. Think about something like an organization related to religious, cultural aspects that are religious. You get to become a member perhaps because of who your parents are and they bring you to a particular church, but there's also converts, people who enter the church or religious organization because they were perhaps affected by something in their life that moved them to action, that moved them to feel like they needed to become part of a religious organization. They searched all the available churches and religious affiliations and felt like this was the one for them. Well, every religion has a set of things that you need to do. Maybe it's tests, maybe it's meetings with a priest, maybe it is a set of agreements that you make that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But there's agreements that you make in order to join that particular group. So how you became a member is important and valuable because it sets up for the organization not only a value system in being a member, but it says that we all have this foundation upon which we all work outward from. So this foundation is important because to be a member, you have done this. Think about becoming a member of the United States. To become a U.S. citizen, you go through tests. You go through the scrutiny of your background checks. You are not only have you gone through these classes and you've met the requirement of these tests, but you've become a naturalized citizen. It's a long process. And so the people who had become U.S. citizens have gone through this process that teaches them things about what it means to be an American citizen, about what democracy is and how it works here, about our foundational stories, our core democratic values. That means that to be a U.S. citizen, those are the things that are valuable that you have to know. Becoming a member for any organization sets the prerequisites for what's important to this group. And that's why it's really important to understand how somebody becomes a member. The lower barriers to acceptance as a group member, and the easier it is to become a group member, the less intensity that one feels towards the culture of the group. The harder that it is, the more intense affinity that they feel for groups. There was a military study that was presented in a military quarterly journal, and one of the things that they said was people who are members of the military who join the elite ranks, so you're talking about Green Berets or Navy SEALs, feel an intense connection to the culture of that group in no uncertain terms because it's really hard to become a member, because they find identity, they find pride in that cultural signifier that they're part of the most elite group within their particular branch of the armed forces. So that's how membership thresholds can create a culture in which people care to become a part of, because cultural success is derived potentially by how you become a member to that particular group. Diversity also provides a certain avenue for cultural success because it provides a team's competitive advantage. That seems like a strange way to say it. I write that up there paradoxically to hopefully help you unpack it in this way. Diversity is not important because you say that I have X number of people from X number of social groups. Diversity is important because, simply put, you can't fully understand the experience of another human being without walking a mile in their shoes. And a group or an organization is made stronger through diversity, not because they can check boxes off a list. It's much more because they have the full worldview that people who are of diverse backgrounds bring to the table. Why is it important not to have an all-female, an all-male group? Because the female viewpoint represents 50% of the population, and although we share a relative experience, there are specific life experiences that a female of gender can bring to the table that a male cannot. Why is it important to have racial diversity whenever you're discussing certain subject matters? Let's choose one that's a hot button in the news right now. When you're talking about racial profiling and you're talking about interaction with the police, no matter which side of the spectrum that you fall on, I think it's important to recognize that in a discussion like that, an organization that was meant to try to find solutions to the problems that we have with the connection between police officers and law enforcement officers and the communities that they serve and protect, needs to have a diverse representation within it. Why? Not because we want to be able to say, well, we're a very diverse group. No, we want to be able to say that the ideology, the point of view, the opinions of each of the groups that need to be represented are represented fairly. We've heard a viewpoint that you can't bring to the table. And let me kind of give you an example that's in a day-to-day life that I think will help illustrate this cultural success. I am lucky enough always to be the debate coach here at Anderson State University in addition to my assistant professor job. And what happens when you're on a debate team is people, whenever it comes to how you join the debate team, join with a very low threshold, and I said that was typically bad, but people get to feel connected with it over time. They join because they have interest. They join because they have a competitive desire. I'll get into those things if you want my rah-rah speech on the debate team. But what you get is a glimpse into diversity. I hear these conversations from students, and I always feel like my life is made better by the way that they interact in the van when we travel from one place to another. We travel all across the United States and we compete in academic debate. And what I hear is a lot of people who are from radically different socioeconomic backgrounds, who are different racial backgrounds, who are obviously of different genders. And they come together and they have conversations about difficult issues. They have interesting, thought-provoking conversations. And you'll almost always hear this, not always on every trip, but over the course of the semester, or the course of the year, when teams bond together, I have heard this sentence so many times. And to me, it's very moving, and I hope that you can relate. Someone will look at another person, and I can't always see it because I'm driving, obviously, but I know that look, and they say, well, I never thought about it that way. That's the importance of diversity. The fact that you can't think about the way that someone else feels about an important topic until you've talked to them about it. The strength of cultural success that's brought about by diversity is not a checklist, is those experiences that the diverse organization, that the diverse group has to pull from to try to solve problems that makes it more powerful than others. So examples, not command, hold a team together. I want to extend the analogy that I just used. When I talk about my debate team, I gush a little bit, and I know I get very enthusiastic. It's never just a sales pitch for the debate team. It's much more that I really believe the students sell the team to each other more than I sell it to them. The examples of their own personal success, of struggling with difficult topics, of learning, of feeling really good about the pride of ownership that they take over the team, the opportunity that the university provides for them, are a set of examples that hold a team together, that create cultural success. You don't get that from me. The command of the team, I guide, I direct. The position that you hold whenever you are the person that I am the coach of the debate team is called the director of debate or director of forensics. And direction is what I provide, not command. I don't tell everybody that they need to do X, Y, and Z because it's a pluralistic environment. I don't want everybody to have the same opinion. Whenever it comes to how they choose to defend a certain position in an argumentative sense, I want to breed in them the ability to come up with their own thought process. So that cultural success is that they themselves start to think about topics in their own unique way. The idea of voice comes out. Cultural success, whenever it's led by example and not command, allows for a team to be held together by people developing an individual voice in that cultural success. They see their position within it. It matters to them. So also, I want you to recognize that in terms of a source of cultural success for an organization, specialized language fosters cohesion and commitment. Whenever we extend the military analogy that we learned earlier, there are a lot of acronyms that I do not know, and because I've never been a part of the armed forces, so I don't have that background. But when you listen to them speak, they speak in a jargon that is captivating to an outsider, wondering sometimes they will be conveying large amounts of information, and someone on the outside looking in says, I don't know exactly what they said, but it's meaningful to them. It's knowing what those acronyms, what those words, that method of communication, what it really means. Now, this happens in much less ballyhooed and less valuable and important cultural scenarios as well. Whenever I worked as a manager at the Burger King, and I remember being a late teenager still in high school, and I worked as a manager at the Burger King, and you learned the language that was associated from that too. The stations that you had part of. If you were working at the front or the back, or if you were working in the food prep station, there were areas that were designated. You could draw a map, and the things that each person needed to do, the duties, the job requirements, were all fostered by a location that carried with it meaning for the people who were involved. This kind of specialized language fosters cohesion and commitment in a group because they know that that language has meaning. Academic writing in itself has a certain language that is connected with it, whether it be social scientific, whether it be traditional science and an approach like that, whether it be rhetorical studies, whether it be literary analysis, they all have a specialized language that the practitioners of understand very acutely that means something to them. That what are you teaching at a university? If you take a rhetorical criticism class, they're teaching you that language. And as you connect with that language, you can read studies differently than if you don't speak that language. If you've ever picked up a study with a complex quantitative methodology, it talks about the percentages, it talks about ANOVAs, it talks about the way that the study was approached, that the numbers were gathered, that the data was confirmed. And if you don't know what those words mean, if you haven't taken enough quantitative and statistical measures courses in order to understand that language, then it's lost on you. That's gibberish. The method means nothing. So a specialized language fosters cohesion and commitment to a group. If everyone within an organization speaks that specialized language, it carries with it meaning. Remember that we're talking in the cultural frame and symbolic frame about the meaning that things carry. Well, language is obviously pregnant with meaning at all times. And in these cases, what it does is a specialized language fosters a unique cohesion and commitment among group members. We talked about stories, humor, and rituals a little bit in the last chapter, but the idea behind it is we're talking about narrative. Narrative is a story, a through line that you can imagine for an organization about how it coheres together, about how things fit together. And stories carry history and values. They reinforce group identity. Stories are a method of saying, this is what we did, this is what we do, this is what we'll be doing in the future. It provides anecdotal evidence for the functioning of the group. They can be positive or they can be negative. When we're looking for it from a cultural success standpoint, you want to try to drive those stories to be positive in their nature. But downtrodden and unsuccessful cultures do carry with them stories also. Every time you get into a group in your college career, you're going to carry with you the stigma or happiness that is associated with the former group patronage that you had. By being a part of a group in the future, you'll think back to all the class-related groups that you were a member of, and those stories will carry with them values that say that, oh, I hate group work, or no, group work actually makes things easier. And it all depends on the successfulness of the group in which you are thinking about in the story. But the stories, positive or negative, contribute to your future success. And if you have a bunch of people, think about that selection process that we talked about earlier. If you're choosing people who have similar stories to reinforce the values of the group or organization that you want to be a part of, then that creates an identity of success that can be long-term, that can foster in a projective way the things that are positive about the group and actually make groups better from within. Humor is a way to reduce tension and encourage creativity. I have a difficult time. This is my first class in an online setting. I think it sounds like a jerk thing to say, but I don't know how else to say it. I'm much funnier in person. I think for some of you who have had me before, you can testify to this. And if you get the opportunity, or actually I get the opportunity to be your professor in a more traditional setting, I play off the audience. I try to make things lighthearted and fun. This is probably a little more dry because there's no interaction. It's lecture-based. It's just me talking to you through this medium. But humor plays a really important part in reducing tension and encouraging creativity. It lets people think outside of the box. It kids with them. It draws light to the topic that everything is not so serious. So humor is incredibly important in cultural success because it allows for an organization to poke fun at itself, to humanize itself, to make it okay not only to laugh, but to acknowledge that there's a spectrum of human emotion connected with an organization. We talked about rituals and ceremonies, but here's where, whenever we talk about cultural success, we talk about what they were in chapter 12. Why are they important in chapter 13? Is that they lift spirits and they reinforce values. Rituals lift spirits because it creates uniformity. It creates the way in which we do things to be formulaic. Something to hang your hat on. Something to believe in. Something to expect. Rituals are important because they create a formulaic approach to life. They create structure for people who don't otherwise have it within an organization. And ceremonies lift spirits. They make people feel good about the things that they've accomplished. After a hard year where you might have had ups and downs, overcome difficulties and overcome struggles, and succeeded, a ceremony in honor of those who made it, who did these things to overcome the struggles within an organization, reinforces the values of an organization. It makes you proud to be a part of that particular group. And that breeds more cultural success. If in the first place we go back to the military study where we talk about people were really proud to be elite members of the armed forces, well, that ceremony, that ritual, wearing certain signifiers on themselves, that provides the lifted spirit and reinforced value, the pride of ownership, of membership, not ownership, but pride of membership to the organization, to the group. This happens in corporate America. It happens in every organization that you can imagine. The final one we're going to talk about is the informal cultural players make contributions disproportionate to their formal roles. Wow, a lot of syllables. What do I mean by this? Is every team needs a cheerleader inside of it. Not on the outside that's pushing you along and saying you guys are doing good. Every person needs somebody who becomes the soul of their team. An organization thrives when they have somebody who is a font of positivity that brings to the table a certain pride in membership that exudes from them and is infectious. The more that people care about being a member of the organization and that they attribute meaning to the values and the behaviors that they're taking part of within the organization, the greater they contribute, the more they take it seriously. When Organization A, if we're talking about a corporate organization, when Corporation A is outperforming Corporation B, and you can't find a structural, you can't find a human resource attribution, you can't find a political attribution. Some of it really is the symbolic and the culture of the workforce. Let's talk about an overlay here. The human resources frame coupled with the cultural frame. You found the right kind of person who makes these sorts of contributions, who has an indelible spirit, who makes everybody around them feel better, who is not only proud to be a part of the organization, but can instill pride in others. That overlap in finding the right person, a human resources contribution, and that cultural symbolic meaning of they really understand what it means to be a part of this organization is a breeding ground for cultural success. So, what have we talked about today? We've talked about symbolic perspectives and how they help towards team building. We've went through a relatively exhaustive list from the chapter about sources of cultural success and how they function. I think the thing that I would write about if I were in your position was for a response paper. I'd be interested in hearing, were there any sources of cultural success that you can identify that weren't laid out in the chapters? I think there are many more than are here, but it takes your own personal experience. Bring that diversity from your own background to this discussion, and I think you can really enhance it. Second area for a response paper that I would write if I was in your position is I'd be interested to know if an organization that you are in takes any of these concepts, so a case study approach, and it does the opposite. I think I did that a little bit with the debate team whenever I talked about it. The threshold for entry is actually low, which would seem to promote less affinity, but I think that culture overwhelms that from other sources. What I hope you would understand from the case study, and what I'd like you to tease out further, is that all of these forces for cultural success exist in the same world and happen on not a continuum, but happen continuously. They all happen at the same time, and so they can interact with each other. One can supersede the other. Sometimes there are a certain set of successes that are attributed more to one avenue than another. It shows you that the multifaceted nature of a high-functioning and mobile organization is that there are a lot of different inputs to its potential success or failure. It's very difficult to run a successful organization, but thinking about these pieces and how they all fit together, I think, can promote success. I'll also add in with one other thing. The chapter does a really good job of identifying why people feel the way that they do about cultures, about organizations, and how they display that feeling. You could talk about that in a response paper. And you can either illustrate it with examples from your own life, from pop culture references, movies, television programs, and the like. I've been enjoying your responses. A lot of them have been very thoughtful. I think you're replying to each other well. Keep up that good work. I'm looking forward to chapter 14, where we conclude the symbolic cultural frame. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I look forward to reading your reflections.